Hello YouTube, I'm here to review Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. I don't know what to say about this book other than it is one of the best books I've ever read. It is a very profound book in that both uh, its subject matter and its execution, which mostly is telling the story of brothers and their relationship with each other and their father, and lives of other characters that are entangled in their lives, and pretty much the spirit of 19th century Russia. It is a book at a whopping 776 pages, my edition at least, and one of the most passionate works of literature I've ever read. Um, I don't think I'll ever read a book like this again in my life in terms of being able to make me feel appreciative of having the opportunity to live. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. I don't really think there's an afterlife. I don't like a lot of things about organized religion, but I kind of wish I was religious because of this book. First time I read this book over 10 years ago, I was a believer, I guess, that was struggling with existential and theological questions about, is there a God, and like, can I live my life without a God? Because I went to a religious school, and reading this book pretty much settled the question. You don't need to believe in God to be a good person, even though I would say Dostoevsky argues that a belief in God is necessary for salvation. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about with this book, and I just don't know where to start. It's a pain in the ass to review books you don't like, but I realize it's as big as a pain in the ass to review books that you not just like, but you just adore so much that you don't know what to say because you just don't want to butcher it. I mean, I think the best place to start for now is the plot. I mean, this is a book about three brothers, Dmitri, Ivan, and Alyosha Karamazov, and their relationship with each other and their father, Fyodor Karamazov. And a lot of the book centers around, I would say, the eldest son's, Dmitri, uh, his strained relationship with his father, and the death of his father, which he was suspected of. This is not a spoiler because the first page of the book says that Fyodor Karamazov dies, and it's a fishy circumstance, and son is highly suspect because of the strained relationship, because of all the different motives, and but a lot of the book also delves into the lives of other characters involved with this family saga, and along the way, there's a lot of themes that get caught up about. I mean, there's a lot of close inspection of like people that are in all the different classes of Russian society. Like the peasants, who were just freed from being serfs, but it's still they're like very social economically dependent on masters. So there's that kind of relationship between the poor and the middle upper class that hasn't really been resolved by the emancipation of the serfs. There's these new class of people, like them, probably represented by the Miasov family, cousins of the brothers who were like these wealthy people who have more of like a pro-Western European sense of values and think Russia should progress and adopt these values. And there's like these, I guess Slavophiles, or like Russians are very proud of just being Russian and want to resist this, and those who want to cling to their tradition, their roots, and not, be infected with all the ideas in Europe. And then there's like the devout Christians, mostly the priests. I mean, monks in the monasteries, and all the Russians that believe in God, whether like sincerely or just like at face value, playing lip service, because like a lot of religious people, especially the middle class, I'd say, or the upper middle class, they say things like, oh my God, oh God save him, but they don't really have they don't really mean it. And yeah, this book touches on a lot of things, and I would say that Dostoevsky does such a great job that this book is almost universal in its value. I can not only relate a lot to the character in this book, but every time I read this book, I just see a lot of other people in my life that are in this book. I mean, like when I read Notes from the Underground, I see a lot of parts of myself on the Underground man. But when I read Karamazov, I see a lot of people in my life that remind me of this character. And I can't think of another book that does this. So, I mean, the plot revolves, like I said, mostly around what happens between the eldest brother and the father. But I don't know, like the plot it gets actually more interesting halfway through the book after Fyodor is found murdered, and Mitya's taken into custody, and all these things happen. The aftermath of his murder, and I think it's more interesting to talk about some of the subplots and actually the themes in the book, or in the long philosophical and religious discussions in the book. I think this is the heart of the book. Actually, I mean, the plot is interesting in itself because you really want to know if Mitya did it or not. I mean, the impression you get as a reader, and the impression I get as a reader, is that he did, and he had all the reasons to. Well, not really, but he had all the motivation. Let's say he had the motive to kill him, and then you feel like, why should I read a 700-page book if I know who did it? But I mean, I look into the character of Mitya, Ivan, and Ilyosha, and I see three brothers who have been neglected by their father, and I see them having all the reason to neglect him back or even kill him. But I don't think neither of them had the capacity to actually murder their own father, and I doubt it the whole time Mitya was arrested. He killed him, but I'm not really sure. Just one of those things, and eventually, I'm not going to spoil anything. But at the end of the book, you eventually find out whether he killed him or not. It's just one of those books that draws you in because of all the action and suspense that happens, like not just between the pace of plot, but because of the dynamics of the characters with each other and their inner monologues and all these passionate scenes. People breaking into rooms, making a scandal, and hitting each other, and waking up next day and says, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that," or "I think the guy deserved it. He's a son of a bitch." I mean, it mirrors real life. I've seen this happen. In real life, where I live, people can be temperamental and, end up, regretting what they do the next day. And then this seems, yeah, pretty normal. So yeah, I feel like I don't want to say too much. So let me just go to what I really like about this book. And I'm going to read a quote by one of my favorite characters, the Elder Zosima. "Above all, do not lie to yourself. A man who lies to himself or listens to his own lie comes to a point where he does not discern any truth either in himself or anywhere around him, and thus falls into disrespect towards himself and others. Not respecting anyone, he ceases to love, and having no love, he gives himself up to passions and coarse pleasures, in order to occupy and amuse himself. And in his vices reaches complete bestiality, and it comes all from lying continually to others and to himself. A man who lies to himself is often the first to take offense." Sometimes it feels very good to take offense, doesn't it? And I just laugh every time I read this because I just feel like I'm a very vindictive person, and I really like that feeling when someone says even like the most innocuous thing that comes off as like a offense, and I just want to get angered for no reason. I just think that this is part of like not being true to yourself or not being true to your character. I mean, like I don't know what that means. Being true to yourself, like be yourself. Like that sounds like a cliche, but I think like this is a kind of like a Christian way of like not letting others get to you by being honest, and that like you want to get angry because you want a reason to take out your anger on others because you're not happy with yourself. And instead of doing that, just fix yourself and like know who you are, set on a path of discipline, and try to be one with God and not let others easily affect you. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a Christian, not a practicing Christian, but this is something I try to apply to my life by reading Stoics, and what makes more sense to me. And I just as a non-believing Christian, just born into it, this book was like a source of a lot of spiritual nourishment, and I just live for these kind of books. I can't read the Bible without getting bored or feeling that I cannot get anything out of it in terms of like spiritual nourishment unless I really believe in God, and I just can't for whatever reason. And just books like these that I feel like vicariously give me this sense of nourishment. And let me go find a passage of discussion between Ivan and Alyosha. Um, this is actually why I liked the book the first time I read it. Ivan was my favorite character the first time I read it. He was basically like my hero, or the kind of person I wanted to be. Even though towards the end of the book you see what happens to him, and it's not very pleasant. It's very similar to what happens to Nietzsche. But I felt like he gave all the arguments of why the arguments against the existence of God, and it is not what you expect, because like one of the strongest arguments against the existence of God is the problem of evil, and one of the most common rebuttals to that is that God didn't make evil. God made human beings. God gave human beings freedom, and with this freedom, man brought evil to this world, and that is a fairly sensible rebuttal. I'm not a Christian apologist. I don't I'm not an expert in debates about God and everything, but I think Ivan's sustained attack on Christianity is one of the most most devastating attacks on not just Christianity but any religion, mainstream Abrahamic religion, because it is it appeals not just to reason, but it appeals to your emotions. But let me go back. Let me go find the passage first before I ruin this. This is one passage I really liked where Ivan explains why he can't love people, and it's something that I also found applies to me and maybe everybody else. This is Ivan talking. I must make an admission, Ivan began. I never could understand how it's possible to love one's neighbors. In my opinion, it is precisely one's neighbors that one cannot possibly love. Perhaps if they weren't so nigh, so near. I read sometime, somewhere, about John the Merciful, some saint, that when a hungry and frozen passerby came to him and asked him to be made warm, he lay down with him in bed, embraced him, and began breathing into his mouth, which was foul and festering with some terrible disease. I'm convinced that he did it with a strain of a lie, out of love enforced by duty, out of self-imposed penance. If we were to come to love a man, the man himself should stay hidden, because as soon as he shows his face, love vanishes. And I just can't help laughing like at this, because of how much, like, no matter how much of a person, let's say, I want to be, or anybody wants to be, as soon as they come across someone that's it's just like the smallest details that bother us about people that makes us start not caring about humanity. And when you're alone, or like when you have all these deep thoughts about wanting to care about humanity as a whole, and want to serve people and be get a job that's like volunteering for the poor and disadvantaged. As soon as you come across one annoying person with a bad breath, or is walking too slowly in front of you, you just get angry all over again and feel like you're doing this by force. And so I want to try to boil down what is Ivan's chief attack against Christianity in this book. After talking about the problem of evil, and hearing out Alyosha's rebuttal of that, like, problem with evil is something brought about by human beings, not God, Ivan starts invoking well, I understand why bad things happen to people, because they brought it on themselves, because we're all born sinners, but I don't understand why bad things and horrible things happen to children. And in the book, he brings out examples of all these things that I think that really happened in Russia. I mean, the footnotes say that, not the footnotes, but the notes in the book say that some of these were things that actually happened in Russia at the time. Dostoevsky read in newspapers, or this one child being tortured, like a master takes a serf's child, puts him in the wild and tells him to run, and sends his dogs after him, and the kid gets ripped apart in front of his mom. And it just is one of like maybe 3 other examples in the book that Ivan gives that says that, like, I understand there's evil in the world because, men created evil, because man is born in sin. But I don't understand why children who are not born in sin, who are innocent, get to suffer as well. I don't understand how God would allow this. And I think because of this, there cannot be no God. Because if there is a God, then he's no God of mine. I will spit on his face, and so on and so forth. And when I was trying to, do some research on this book, I found out that Dostoevsky was, as he was writing this in a serial form, chapter by chapter, and was published in a weekly form. His publisher was like, we can't really print this because this is a very good argument against the existence of God. And Dostoevsky's like, oh, no, don't worry. I have something planned up to assure my readers there is a God. And apparently Dostoevsky was afraid he couldn't come up with a counter argument. But, according to scholars or like Dostoevskians, chapter in the book on Elder Zozima's life does provide a refutation or a resolution to this problem. And maybe I'll go back to that. So in the Grand Inquisitor, Ivan, reads a long poem he wrote that basically is about the second coming of Christ. And in this long poem, Christ comes back and does some miracles in the middle of the Spanish Inquisition, and the Grand Inquisitor, arrests him and brings him to jail and has this long monologue, admonishing Christ for coming back and telling him that, the church, we, or me, I, the Grand Inquisitor, have taken over. We are doing your work. You have nothing to add, and we are no longer working for you, Jesus Christ, but for him, Satan, because according to Grand Inquisitor, Christ made a big mistake of giving people the freedom to choose, or giving them the freedom to for redemption, because he claims, the Grand Inquisitor, that no one, or very like few human beings in the world have the capability to reach heaven. So what they did is they just took over responsibility by being this authoritative institution and church, and gave people what they want, which is an authority to tell them how to live so that they could reach salvation. But all this is based on a lie, or a noble lie, like in Plato's Republic. I don't want to get into too much detail or discussion because I've read it a few times, and I think I'll do a separate video on the Grand Inquisitor. Actually, if you guys have, if you guys really request it, I will go deep in detail, but it is a dense chapter in itself, and it requires attention to detail, and I didn't prepare for that chapter too much on my own. All right, and the last thing I want to read, because apparently this is the heart of the book, and it's supposed to inform also the later half of the events that unfold in the book. So this is Elder Zosima talking. This is what he says in a penultimate paragraph in chapter 3, part 6. Much on earth is concealed from us. Much on earth is concealed from us. But in place of it, we have been granted a secret, mysterious sense of our living bond with the other world, with the higher heavenly world. The roots of our thoughts and feelings are not here, but in the other worlds. That is why philosophers say it is impossible on earth to conceive the essence of things. God took seeds from other worlds and sowed them out on this earth, and raised up his garden, and everything that could be sprouted, but it lives and grows only through its senses of being in touch with other mysterious worlds. If this sense is weakened or destroyed in you, that which has grown up in you dies. Then you become indifferent to life, and even come to hate it. So I think. I don't know what to make of this, but in reading it, I thought it was one of the more spiritual, philosophical passages that try to talk about. This is the section of the book that's supposed to be, according to Dostoevsky, the refutation, or the real resolution to Ivan's arguments against the existence of God. And I don't know how to spell that out in detail, but Zosima embodies all that is great in not the world, but all that is great in the capability of the human spirit to overcome evil, to not just accept it, but to be an example for others. He is apparently capable of healing people when they're sick. He's capable of like predicting that an old woman's son coming back from Siberia after not hearing from him. And he is, yeah, I would say maybe Christ-like figure, but more like, I guess, a normal man that just happens to have this aura around him because of the awe and respect he commands from people from all walks of life. Um, I think reading this part essentially kind of shows that like it's a kind of Platonism where there's a material world we live in right now, and then there's like this other world, the spiritual world that we cannot see, that's unintelligible. And this is something that I think Judeo-Christian religions have also taken up, the higher world that is unintelligible to the senses, and it's probably only seen or felt through our intellect or our faith. I don't know how that is a refutation to horrible things happening to children, them getting tortured, raped, imprisoned, and mutilated. But I think it's his way of saying when our sense of being in touch with this other world dies, we start becoming to be miserable and hate this life and end up committing these acts of atrocities that happen. And these children paid a price. These children go to heaven or whatever. But the fact that they live in this world means that there's the possibility that they're going to die and horrible things happen. There's evil in the material world, but there's no evil in the other world. I don't know. That's my interpretation. And I think this is something that cannot be accepted by atheists, because atheists don't believe in an afterlife. They don't believe. I guess atheists could be Platonists. They could believe in a higher being. Like most mathematicians believe that math comes from another realm, that's not material. But this is a very hard sell for people who don't really believe in God or another world or a higher world. But even as an atheist or agnostic, I was very taken in by these passages and found them as nourishing as other parts in the book. And I think that'll be it. I just don't know how else to do this book justice. I skipped over a lot of parts of the book that I liked, like the parts about the kids, Kolya Krasotkin and Ilyusha. I've skipped over a lot of main characters like Grushenka, Katerina Ivanovna, even Smerdyakov, who was actually an interesting character in his own right. But I just want to keep this as simple as possible for one of the best books I've ever read, and one of the books I'll probably keep rereading for the rest of my life. If there's any cons to this book, I would say, it's written in a way where the structure is ambitious, and there are a lot of loose ends, or some loose ends in the book that never get resolved, but that's partly because Dostoevsky originally intended this book to be a part of a series of books that he wanted to publish in a bigger volume called The Life of an Ardent Sinner. And he died a few weeks after the publication of this book, its full form. And, fortunately for us, we missed out on all the other stuff after the publication of the Brothers K, but at least we got the Brothers K. And that's it for now. This is not my favorite review, but this is one of my favorite books. So yeah. And again, if you guys have got any suggestions of books you want me to review, I'm open for suggestions. I'm willing to spend my money on any book, even I don't like, as long as you guys think I like it. So yeah, give me suggestions. Tell me about what kind of books you guys like. And yeah, keep reading and have a good one. So long, guys.